I was driving down to Blacksburg and nervous as everything for my very first doctoral class. And it was a statistics class. There's the facts. It was quantitative 1. And the professor, Dr. Mito Chang, she's now a good friend, wasn't at the time. But Dr. Mito Chang was doing her very best that evening and admitted it to me later. She was trying to scare down the number in the class from 23 to a manageable 15. And she just right out of the gate, she started out by saying, hey, I want you to go around the room, I want you to say your name, I want you to say where you're at in the program, and then I want you to talk a little bit about your dissertation topic. I was visibly the 8th person in line. I can remember it very vividly. And the first 7 were toward the end of their program, and they said their names with confidence, and they said where they were at in program near the end, and then they talked so articulately about their thesis. And it came time for me to share. And I panicked. I froze. I had nothing. I eked out my name in falsetto. And I said, this is my first class of my doctoral studies. And there was a silence. And I thought maybe that the professor would come to my rescue and say, well, of course, you would not need to be talking about your dissertation topic. But no, she paused, that awkward pause, go on. And then it just came out. I will be writing on prejudice reduction in the field of education. I will be assessing whether or not coursework in diversity can significantly reduce prejudice levels among the predominantly white, monolinguistic, middle-class future teaching force. I said that I thought it was imperative that we work on prejudices, our own personal prejudices and biases. Even our personal preferences of teachers, we're going to be working with a more and more racially and ethnically diverse population. Again, it was an awkward silence. And I turned about 4 different shades of brown. I'm embarrassed. I could have chosen any topic. I could have chosen any topic known to mankind. But I chose at that moment to become an expert in prejudice reduction. Why? Why? And to answer that question, I have to go back. Not to the place that comes from the selectivity of the history books that speak so minimally about Black America. And it's more than the slavery stories. It's more than hearing about Harriet Tubman and Nat Turner. It's more than hearing about Medgar Evers and Marcus Garvey. It's so much more than Rosa Parks. It's more than the stories about Jim and Jane Crow and the civil rights story of Malcolm X marking the spot and MLK being in alignment with the visions, the views, and the values of the Anabaptist movement. Now, don't get me wrong. All of that is part of my lineage, and it's important. But the answer why comes from a place that's very, very personal. It's a place that continues to be a part of my identity formation, and it's a place that puts me into the very story of being Black in America. And I go back to 1969. A woman by the name of Karen Johnson, awaiting the birth of her child. She was a woman who had made a consequential choice in life and became pregnant at a very early age. Her boyfriend, who was older, was a musician, and he went on what was to be a short tour. He called back and said, Karen, I'm not coming back to you. Karen had to make a difficult choice, and she elected to give her child up for adoption. And the next part of the story, I can only imagine. I can see her. I can see her in that hospital bed. with a baby boy in her arms. And the social worker comes in and hands her a clipboard in exchange for the baby. She signs away a primal piece of her existence, creating a primal wound in both. And I miss her. But then the Heartmans came. And the Heartmans said, "We got you." It's fresh, isn't it? Thus began my role in black history. Raised in a religious, all-white family in a non-diverse area of Missouri, I poignantly remember the moment when I recognized my racial differences as I looked at a family picture. Wait for it. Can you believe the photographer? They stuck me in right on the very bottom, like an afterthought. But this was about the time when I started to recognize that I was a little different. My parents made a move to the barrio of New Mexico to pastor a small Mennonite church, but I was unprepared for the cultural and racial division. I was unprepared for how race played out in both the secular and the religious environments I existed in. In the religious setting, the pain was greater as I grew older because my expectations were very different and much higher than I had for secular society in general. I was confronted with all these different cultural nuances and stereotypes that were expectations for young black males, such as a particular music to listen to, and my way of sticking it to the man and not being Uncle Tom, not selling out, keeping my textbooks in my locker at school so I didn't look too white and I could hide my intelligence. And this was all new for me. We moved to New Mexico. This was all new for me. And all of a sudden, in 1979, I was introduced to the Sugar Hill Gang. A little Mennonite. I'd only heard Christian music, Mennonite music. I felt like the little Mennonite church choirs. And then this was new. It was like this. I said, hip, hop, the hip, 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 hop, we go, rock it to the bang, bang, now what you hear is not a hip hop, rap it to the beat. See me, the crew, and the rest, you're gonna try to move your feet. Now I am Wonderluke, and I'd like to say hello to the black, to the white, the red, and the brown, the honors, and yellow. But first, we got bang, bang, the boogie to the boogie, say up, jump, the boogie to the bang, boogie, say rock. You don't stop. I got a riddle that'll make your body rock. What?
Yeah.
All right.
Right on.
Right now, but this was my awakening. I started to look for more information about this culture, about what it meant to be black in America. And at that time, when hip-hop actually meant something that had something to say, Mennonite meant Grandmaster Flash, and there was a message. Turn this up. Let me mash this a little bit. Check it out. Broken glass everywhere. People on the stairs, you know, they just don't care. I can't take the smell. I can't take the noise. Got the money to move out. I guess I got no choice. Rats in the front room, roaches in the back, junkies in the alley with the baseball bat. I tried to get away, but I couldn't get far from the man with the touch of repossessed my car. Don't push me, cause I'm close to the edge. I'm trying not to lose my head. It's like a jungle sometimes. It makes me wonder how people are going under. Now listen.
Say it again.
It's like a jungle
Sometimes when I'm wondering why I can't keep under.
One.
Yeah. Word. All right. That is really funky. You just
It
go,
was the
boy.
very beginning of my understanding of what it means to be associated with a group of people that has been under the systemic foot of oppression for a very, very long time. It was the very beginning of my understanding to the oppression that began with slavery 500 years ago, the Plymouth Rock that landed on African Americans, the protocol of Jim and Jane Crow, and what it really means to be a hyphenated race in America. It was my beginning of an understanding of the privileges of whites in America. Many of these privileges that were provided by big government intervention. Like the Homestead Act of 1862, which gave over 200 million acres of essentially free land to white families. Or the FHA home loan program that helped the workings of the private housing market. And now with the browning of America, the very people who accepted and maybe even bankrupted this inheritance are now yelling for smaller government. Game's locked, we swallowed the key. That was my secular understanding. I grew up the son of a Mennonite pastor. And at the same time, I was beginning to ask questions about my race and what it all means. And I began to see some similar events and characteristics within the church. You see, when it comes to growing up Mennonite, I did learn that I was on the inside. You see, I was on the inside because my grandfather, Menno Troyer, was a pastor for 37 years at West Liberty Mennonite Church in Inman, Kansas. That's a good start. I was on the inside because my father was a Mennonite preacher for 24 years. I was prayed for every single day. I was dedicated to the Lord for a Mennonite congregation. I learned at an early age that you must consciously decide to believe in Christ before you can be baptized. I was on the inside, you see. I was on the inside because I was taught that violence was wrong, that we were called to be peacemakers, pacifists, non-violent. I grew up with the belief that we are called to serve others and that there's no greater service than to serve those less fortunate or less privileged than ourselves. I was on the inside because I was called into discipleship. I was called as a Mennonite to follow the model of Jesus Christ. I was called to community. I was called to accountability. I was on the inside because I learned the customs and the heritage that went along with simple living. My mother was the gifted educator on living more with less. I'm on the inside because I do understand the heritage, the customary foods. I can sing and appreciate the beauty of four-part harmony. I can sing 3 verses of God Te Liebe, and I know the difference between Schwartz-Truber and Schwartz-Truber. I'm on the inside, you see. Yet, I felt like I was on the outside. Because when I was young, I would stare at the beautiful pictures of Jesus on the Sunday school walls and in my little Bible, and this Jesus did not look like me, but looked like every other person in the Mennonite church. I felt like I was on the outside because I had to become uncomfortable. I didn't have the privilege of not becoming uncomfortable when the #1 youth fundraiser across the Mennonite church was entitled a slave auction. A slave auction. I felt on the outside when as a young adult I would attend other Mennonite churches without my father being there or without my family being around me, and others would see me only as another person of color, not able to assume that I was a Mennonite, not knowing whether or not I was a Christian, not knowing whether or not I was rooted in biblical knowledge, not knowing whether or not I was schooled in Anabaptist history and thought, intelligent, articulate. I felt on the outside when I attended 2 different Mennonite institutions of higher ed, and I heard racial epithets from my Christian classmates, including a person who stated, "We don't want any of your kind here." But I thought your kind was my kind. These are just a few historical experiences that led me to choose the dissertation topic I chose on prejudice reduction and commit my life to it. I see and experience both the explicit and the implicit acts of prejudice that hurts and dehumanizes who it happens to. I know the pain of being the recipient of it. But I know something even more important. I know what it does to the person expressing it. And most of the time, they don't even have a clue. It demeans, it dehumanizes, it denigrates the person who's carrying it out. And they're only carrying it out because others are not like them. The Church of Jesus Christ and institutions like EMU that claim His name must reflect the reality of His kingdom, in which people are included, accepted, and celebrated. Thank you for letting me share my heart today. This is not just about what is wrong with people who are prejudiced, but it's about what I believe God has called me to commit my life to in order to do something about it. Amen.
Amen.